Well, maybe I'm on a roll. You know, I sure miss jawing from those years. We would just listen to adults jabberjaw, shoot the bull, we called it. Any profanities, and never any obscenities, but profanities would be behind closed doors, not in social settings. So certainly not in the church crowd, and even around neighbors and so forth. It was interesting because when I was in social settings and people wanted to swear, they would drop their voice, say the swear word, and then resume their natural conversation. And now people scream out obscenities just walking along the parking lot. No dope crazed people. Children were safer. My sister and I have talked about, we had some narrow chafes, some narrow escapes, and I didn't totally escape. I would let her speak for herself, but she described some situations to me that were very bizarre, but they were, these people would have to crawl out from under a rock. I remember when I was a child, well, what hole did you crawl out from under, and things of this nature. Never dreaming that I'd ever be an old codger, and I remember old people and adults were something to tolerate, you know, something that we were confined and so forth. And so we went on to Florida to be with our cousin Margaret, who was my Uncle Frank's adopted daughter. We got to hang out with our cousins, and I remember then the girls, we went to the seashore, and these girls smoking their Benson and Hedges again. So apparently Benson and Hedges was quite popular at that time, and I was thinking, are they old enough to smoke? I was 13, and when we went to the Presbyterian church, I think it was, everybody was putting out their cigarette in the ashtray before they went into worship, and I was thinking, wow, we don't do that at Federated, and we never, you know, get out of Federated, and somehow we ended up, you know, going to the Presbyterian church of Margaret's, Ken and Margaret, and they had these teenage, you know, girls, and it was like Hermie Dorothy kind of Summer of 42 thing, where these are really old people. I mean, they've got to be at least 2 or 3 years older, and my, the difference, and they're jutting out, and you know, it's hard not to miss. They are amply endowed, these girls, and I remember I just have to kind of keep turning my eyes away and not feast my eyes too much on this, because it's kind of bodacious. So anyway, we are there, and we go through the orange orchard, and it could be Disney World. Without getting on the internet, it actually escapes me, because I thought there was only one Disney, and now, you know, then later on I find out there's 2 Disneys, and there's 2 Disneys too many for me. But we have the time of our lives, and I want to write it all down, and I can't, because there's always someone staring, or, you know, Craig, what are you doing? I don't have to give an account. Let me see what you wrote. Well, no, because it's got this, it's a diary, and it's you notice it's got this thing that I can close around it and lock it. Well, it just didn't work in our family. So let's see here. But of course, you know, that was a 1 or 2 week vacation, and it was the typical vacation that you even see on the movie screens at that time. It was harried, and the kids were strained on the nervous system of the adults, and you got to watch out for your grandma and your grandpa now, because they're not as young as they used to be, and getting you know, cajoled and scolded for things like that. Typical to me, you know. But out, I had been following it prior to that, and week after week it built, and it was a series, but it could have almost been called a serial. Now, it didn't have a cliffhanger, because these were morality tales for the most part. Dr. Kimball saving, you know, some kid's life, someone's life, getting out of one scrape, eluding the law, and each episode was distinct, but it, you know, kind of built on top of each other. You could have done a scramble with it, and it still would have come up the same. But the episodes were arranged, however, I think they were arranged by air dates and by the way they were shot. And what, you know, we didn't know what color television was, I think, in 1966. Later on, maybe even that same year, my mother bought us our first color television. Maybe it was in 1966 she did. Could have been in early 67. Could have been actually Easter of 67, but Mr. Spock says it's hard to get exactly, you know, in the city on the edge of forever. He says if we arrive a month before McCoy, if we're fortunate, we may arrive a month. He could not, in his mind, string time together, and being older, it's hard for me to get exact in my recollections. I can almost do a Spock thing, that if I get within a year or a month of what I'm talking about, I may be fortunate. But and there's no guardian of forever to, you know, exactly key me in, and he couldn't key them in when they went back to Chicago to stop Dr. McCoy from ruining the time continuum. So anyway, that was another one with Star Trek, and that's a whole different ball game. That too built on top of one another, but that was definitely in color. It was definitely long-haired, and by that I mean it wasn't like Lost in Space. And it took a certain adjustment. Once I got onto it, I figured out, you know, there was an abstraction to it. And I think that's where I first began abstract thinking. But so faithfully, you know, once we got onto something, our home was, there was a night for the Virginian, the night for Peyton's Place. And we, you know, we didn't necessarily talk as a family. We watched TV, or yelled or screamed, or you know, you kids do this, and oh, Mom, do we have, you know, it was this kind of rigmarole. And Forrest, I just don't know what to do with these children, and oh, Glee, we'll make out, you know. It was not overtly ever obvious to me that I was in a, you know, totally dysfunctional family by textbook standards, but I mean, to me, we functioned somehow. We just weren't the textbook functioning family. But anyway, Batman came on, and the big, you know, rigmarole was hurry up and shovel the food in, because we went to the utility room to eat around the dining table, and the dining room was not where we ate. So there was kind of an oddball rhyme or reason to it, and there was, well, Nora, what did you do today? My grandmother usually instigated the conversations, and a lot of times they were forced and strained, and before long it broke into an argument or something of that nature. Heated voices, and my mother and my grandmother went at it, and my grandfather would get his ball cap and put it on. Well, Craigie, let's go. And off we'd go, and we'd get out there, and I'd look up to him, and he'd say, we're going to blow the stink off. Years later, I found out that was kind of a farm expression, but these were farm people. So, blow by blow, I mean, this kid's life just unfolds, and I'm watching The Fugitive, and it's not a cliffhanger, but I want to come back next week and see what happens to Dr. Kimball, whom I thoroughly believe, William Conrad thoroughly believes, the audience is cued in. This man did not do what society accuses him of doing. So I'm sure that formed something in my character of idealism, right from wrong, as did Star Trek, but I didn't I mean, we didn't break open a Bible and have a devotional. We didn't talk about, we tried not to talk about anything deep. You know, it was waiting for company to come so we would have conversations. But it was typically soybean prices, corn, you know, surface stuff. And, you know, once in a while I'd get into it with my grandfather and ask him a question. And then he'd say that I asked him and I can't repeat it on the video, I asked, I'll just put it in milder terms, I asked the gosh darndest questions, and our link letter said kids say the darndest things. So it was kind of a really innocent time, and we were sheltered from evil and wickedness as much as possible. And I suppose I will go to my grave believing that my grandparents, in their flawed way, would that be the I just absolutely adored them. I just kind of worshiped the ground they walked on, and knew something was wrong, but found out about my aunt. That kind of answered a lot of questions, and when my mother was around, we tiptoed like walking on eggshells, and she would storm in, go into her room, and be reclusive the rest of the night. And it was not an ideal situation, but it was an ideal time just after JFK, reaching for the moon, and a time of Camelot, and idealism, and highly patriotic, whether it was a donkey or a jackass or an elephant. We believed in our government, we believed in everything until Vietnam. The whole thing unraveled until the sexual revolution, and the whole thing unraveled until Virginia Slims and women's liberation, and the whole thing unraveled until contention in the church and pastors getting fired and forced out, and you know, Easter Bunny a myth, Santa Claus a myth, and trying to protect my sister from all of this. And at some point, you know, it dawns on a person, maybe I was sold a bill of goods and what's right and what's wrong. And if you end up in college, they say, are you sure what's right is right? And they try to, by situation ethics and all that stuff, reform your worldview. But mine became pretty concrete. I just say television raised me, and they had some awfully good programming. My Three Sons, The Rifleman, Andy Griffith, Family Circle. There was Family Circus, and there was Family Circle. And somewhere along the line, the fugitive had to catch the one-armed man. the confrontation had to come.